What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you guys checking it out, and if you've been following us for a while, you might be wondering what we've been up to for the last 15 or so days. We actually took a little break, went on vacation, and headed down to Florida, where it was a little bit warmer than up here, and we really had a good time. I'll put some video clips in today's video of what we were up to while we were down there. We really enjoyed ourselves, and it was really nice to just get away for a little while. But now we're back, and we're going to be working on the $500 budget Civic build. If you guys don't care to see what we were up to on vacation, you can go ahead and skip forward to the timestamp I'll put right down here. But if you want to stick around and check them out, we really had a good time, and I'd love to share it with you guys. So we'll go ahead and roll some of those videos real quick. So as you guys could see, we stayed pretty busy while we were down there. It was nice to just take a break and have some fun and enjoy some of the warm weather. Luckily, I have some family members that work at Disney, so I was able to get us some hopper tickets and we were able to bounce around between the parks. Neither one of us had been there since we were super little, so it was kind of cool to see the changes in technology and the rides in general. It was just a really fun time. Also, if you guys are ever down that way, I highly recommend checking out the Kennedy Space Center. We really enjoyed it and it was just a fantastic experience. We happened to get really lucky and we went on the same day that they were going to be launching the SpaceX rocket to the space station, so that was really cool. I like that kind of stuff and I had never been, so it was just an all-around awesome experience. And if you guys do ever go, make sure you take the bus ride. It brings you around to another building where they have a really cool experience on the first space launch, and it was just awesome all the way around. You get to see some really cool stuff, so I highly recommend checking out the Kennedy Space Center and some local wildlife tours. We did a couple airboat tours where we got to go out and just check out all the local wildlife, and it was a blast. You get to go out on the water for the day, so we really enjoyed ourselves. But now we're back in Connecticut and dealing with this cold, rainy weather, so we're going to try to bounce around between the rain clouds today and get back to work on the budget Civic build. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. So now that we've gotten through the intro, let's go ahead and get to work. So the first thing we're going to want to do is turn the steering wheel all the way to the left so that we can get in there with a 17mm socket on a 1/2" ratchet. And we're going to turn that crankshaft counterclockwise until we get the marks to line up. So there's a pointer right there on the timing cover, and then you've got a bunch of marks on the crankshaft. Now in our case, we've got 3 marks together to the left, and then we've got that 1 white mark off to the right. So we lined our pointer up with that. Not sure if you guys can get a good look at it from here, but we've got our pointer lined up with that mark. So now we know we are on top dead center for cylinder number 1, and the numbering is from the timing belt, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to go ahead, disconnect our wires, put them off to the side, and I'm also going to go ahead and pull out the plugs just because I want to take a look at them. Like I said, we don't know the history of this thing, so I want to see how it's been running, and the plugs are a good indication of that. So let's get the wires disconnected, pull all the plugs, and then we'll start pulling the valve cover off. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and start pulling our wires off. You guys can mark these or do whatever you'd like so you can keep them in order, but it's pretty self-explanatory with the lengths on them. So we're just going to go ahead and pop all these off. Now we can go ahead and grab a spark plug socket and pop all 4 of these plugs out. I like to keep my plugs in order, so I made this little block. This one's numbered for the LS because that's what we were using it on, but it's just a scrap piece of wood. I used a step bit and then I just cleared it. It came out pretty good. I like using it, helps you keep track of them. So we're going to set them aside and we can start popping this valve cover off. Now we need a 10mm socket so we can go ahead and start breaking these bolts free. I forgot to mention to you guys, ours is leaking right over here in this corner, and it's just coming down the front of the block by where the AC used to be. It's not a huge leak, but it gave me an excuse to dig in here and just see what the top end of this thing looks like. So forgot to mention that before, but that was that leak that I was talking about. Other than that, ours looked pretty decent. So let's go ahead and pop this cover free. Inside of our valve cover looks pretty decent so far. Looks really good. The head actually looks extremely clean, so that's awesome to see. I'm really happy about that. Gasket doesn't look too bad, so we're gonna go ahead and set this aside. We'll clean it up later when we get the new seals and gaskets, but now we can start checking our valve lash. We know that our number 1 piston is on top dead center, so we can start right there. Sorry for the background noise, guys. It's raining pretty good out here now. But this part you guys don't have to do if you don't want. I want to take our top part of the timing belt cover off just so I can take a better look at the belt. again, because I don't know the history of it. So we've got a 10 mil here, and we're just going to go ahead and pop these 2 bolts out and loosen that one down there, and this cover should come right up and out of here. So now we're all set up and we're going to start checking the valve lash. You guys can go anywhere in your spec window for your particular engine, but for us, we're going to be using a 9/1000 for the exhaust and a 7/1000 for the intake. It is at the tightest end of our range, but that's just where I want to set them. You guys can set them wherever you'd like, but we're going to take the 9/1000 and slide it in and see how this feels. That feels a little bit looser than I'd like. Let's check the next one. That one doesn't feel too bad. I think I'll go a tiny bit more with that one. And then we can grab our 7/1000 and check our intake. So with the 7, that actually feels tighter than I'd like. So we're gonna back those off a little bit. That one doesn't feel bad, but this one feels a little bit on the tight side. So let's go ahead, grab our 10mm wrench and our flathead screwdriver, and we're gonna start on the exhaust side. I'm just gonna go one at a time here. Now we can pop that free. We can take our feeler gauge. We can use our flathead to adjust it. You want to have it slide pretty freely. You don't want it to be bound up or too tight. You just want a tiny bit of resistance on it. And you're just going to keep repeating this process until you get it exactly where you want it. Once you're happy with how this one feels, we can move on to this one. So we're just going to go ahead and do the same thing. We'll break the nut loose, and then we can go through and adjust with the screwdriver. Alright, so now that we're happy with the 2 exhaust valves, we can move on to the intake valves. You guys aren't really going to be able to see them too well, so I'm just going to show you on the exhaust valves up here. But we're going to do the same exact thing we did here for the intake valves, and then I'll show you, we will move on to the next cylinder. So now that we've got the valve lash set for cylinders 1, we're going to go ahead and turn the crank pulley. Every 180 degrees of the crank pulley is 90 degrees of the cam pulley. And we're going to be moving to cylinder number 3, so we're going to turn the cam pulley 90 degrees or crank 180 degrees. You can also use a piece of welding wire down into the cylinder. Just be careful, and we can use this to find top dead center or the highest point for that piston's travel. So let's go ahead and start turning the engine over. We should only have to go 90 degrees of the cam pulley. So we did our 90 degrees, and our cylinder number 3 valves are ready to be lashed. So we're going to check our lash here. 9 for the exhaust. Actually feels pretty good. Those ones feel pretty good, so let's check the intake. Alright, so both the exhaust and intake valves feel good on cylinder number 3, so let's turn it over and check the next cylinder. So now we're all set on cylinder number 3. We're going to turn it another 90 degrees, 180 at the crank, and we're going to get number 4 into position so we can adjust it. Let's check the exhaust on number 4. That one feels pretty good. That one feels pretty good as well. It's turning out to be in pretty decent shape, it seems like. Let's check the intakes. That one's good, and that one's good. All right, we're getting lucky here. We're ready to turn this thing over and go to our last cylinder, which would be cylinder number 2. Let's turn this thing 90 degrees one more time. All right, our number 2 rockers should be loose, and they are. So let's go ahead and check those. Once again, our 9/1000ths for the exhaust. That one feels pretty good. That one feels pretty good too. It's kind of weird so far. We only had that one cylinder that was out a little bit. Intake feels good. And that one feels good. I'm going to double check them real quick. Good, 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 good. All right, let's go pick ourselves up a new valve cover gasket. We've got this thing covered up good enough for now. Let's fire up the truck and go pick up the new gasket. Just went in and grabbed the gasket. Should be the right one. So let's go on, head back to the house and get this thing taken care of. Alright guys, so it is the next day. We called it quits last night when we got back with the parts, and the valve cover kit came with the valve cover gasket itself, 4 seals for the spark plug holes, and then some grommets for the bolts. Now we're going to strip this thing down, get it all cleaned up before we go back to reassembly and get ready to put it on. So we're going to need a couple flathead screwdrivers, and then we're also going to need some brake clean to get this thing nice and cleaned up. So let's go ahead and grab some tools and get to work. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pop the seals out that go around the spark plugs. These things can be kind of a pain to get out, but you just keep working them and they will come out. And move on to the next one. We're going to do that with all 4 of these, and then we'll strip the grommets out from the bolt holes and then start cleaning this thing up. Alright, so we pulled one of the bolts with the grommets out, and I'm going to show you guys a little trick that I do to try to get them apart. So I take a big socket that fits the grommet, but the bolt goes through it, and then I just take it like this, and then I'll put it up against the ground right like this, pretend my hand's the ground, and then I just push down, and it'll get this grommet to start going over the little lip there. So just don't pinch your fingers when the socket lets it go. Something kind of like that to get it started, and then usually you can just work it a little bit after that. It'll come off just like so. They're kind of a pain, again, but doable. So let's go ahead and get the rest of those done. So now that we've got our valve cover all cleaned up, I went ahead and took the seals for the spark plugs and just set them in here. And now we're going to use a seal driver. Mine's just a cheap little Harbor Freight kit, but I think you can use a 1 1/4 inch socket for these. But pretty much anything that fits that you can beat on will work perfectly fine. So we're just going to go right down and tap these all in until they're nice, flush, and seated. So we're back out here at the car. We got the head surface all cleaned up, used a rag and some brake clean, just cleaned any oil or debris off of the mating surface there. And then I did go ahead and pop the timing cover back off. I was going to leave it on this car, but we decided we're going to leave it off for a couple different reasons. So for now, that's going to stay off when we put the valve cover on. And as you guys see, the valve cover is assembled. All that's left to do is put the gasket on it. So we're going to get to putting that on. Then we will slap this thing on and start torquing it down. We went with the Felpro, the blue gasket here. I just feel like these ones stay a little bit more flexible for longer. So we're going to try it. I did mention I'm going to use some RTV, but I think today we're going to try without RTV, and then if we have an issue, we can always pop it back off quick and throw some RTV in the problem areas. But I want to see if it's actually going to seal with this Velcro gasket without the RTV first. So that's what we're going to try. Now let's go ahead and get ready to start setting this thing in place. Now sometimes you need to take a little screwdriver and go through here and just flap these little seals out. Alright, now we've got that. So now we can go ahead and grab our bolts. Two long ones go in the back. And then our stud went right here. Then the two bolt head ones go over here. Gonna grab a 10mm socket and a 1/4 inch ratchet, and we're also gonna grab a 1/4 inch torque wrench. I'm just gonna run these down finger tight for now. Now we can set our torque wrench to 120 inch-pounds, and we'll go around and give these things a final torque. All right, now we can tighten our plugs down and start throwing the wires back on it. Let's fire this thing up and check for leaks. Alright guys, let's let this thing warm up for a minute and we'll go take it for a ride. So we just got back from taking this thing for a ride, and I gave it a good look over, and I don't see any more leak, so I think we've got our issue taken care of. We did run all the valves while we were there, and I'm glad that we did, because there were a couple of them that were way tighter than I would like, and there was a couple that were a little bit on the loose side, so we went ahead and got those taken care of. And I'm going to give this thing a clean bill of health, and it is ready for the turbo. Most of the turbo parts have arrived, but we are still waiting on a few things. So once all those parts get here, we will be jumping on that. It should be a pretty quick process, and I think this thing is going to be a lot of fun with some boost. So as always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell. And also check us out on all the other platforms. Bought to Build Official on Instagram, and then TikTok, Facebook, we are Bought to Build. So check us out there, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye.